Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Hello, and welcome back to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak. And I am very excited to introduce you to our next podcast series. All right, so I have been re-releasing old episodes that are themed in like a series throughout this last year. And I'm going to continue that now in 2025. And our next series is called Should I Quit Academia? So the inspiration behind this series was that I did a episode that was called How to Know If It's Time to Quit Academia. And that episode is also on YouTube as a video. And it has gotten so much reaction and traction. And many people have actually found me through that episode. So we will be republishing that episode as part of this series, but also some other episodes from the past that are related to making a decision or how to think about this question that has passed through many people's minds, which is this for me? Like, should I quit? Is this what I really want and what I want to do? And I would say that also in light of the current kind of political situation in the US and what feels like a lot of instability and what actually, let me say honestly, is a lot of instability inside of academia, you might be thinking about this question. So I hope that this podcast series helps you, gives you tools and ways to consider the question, should I quit academia? So you'll be hearing some older episodes and some new ones as well. I'm working on some new content here that will be part of this series, and I can't wait for you to have a listen. Please remember that the very best way to show your love for this podcast is to recommend it to a colleague. And maybe definitely the best way is to recommend one of these series that I've been doing. So if you have a colleague that you've been talking to who maybe you've had this conversation about quitting academia, maybe you've entertained the idea, even if you've jokingly said like, oh, here's my backup plan, then please share this podcast series. The best thing to do is share a specific episode that you enjoyed with someone. And I would really appreciate that very much. Also, a little note, anything that you hear that is from the past, some of these episodes will be from my first 50 episodes in the podcast. You might hear me talking about other offers, other programs, other things. But please know that the only program that is on offer right now is our Navigate program. There's plenty of back episodes where you can hear all about Navigate, and you can get on the wait list by going to scholarsvoice.org/navigate. By getting on the wait list, you will be the first to know when we open our next cohort. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day and enjoy the series, Should I Quit Academia?
All right, folks. Higher ed is in crisis, and it's time for you to make your move. All right, what do I mean by this? Well, let's talk about, I'll refer back to one of my favorite books called The Slow Professor. And there's plenty of other books around about this topic, but I just particularly like that one. And in that book, the authors talk about how the university, the way that it's happening right now, is part of, has been swept up into, or maybe was always part of, a fast capitalist model of labor. So if you'd like to learn more about that, I encourage you to read that book. Now, what do they mean by fast capitalism, right? Like, I'm certainly not an expert. I'm sure some of you listening are. But basically, what we see as the squeezing of labor, right? To like squeeze every drop of quote unquote productivity out of workers. In this case, the workers of the university, right? Like everybody who works there, including you, the professor. Also, this kind of like the diminution of support, so that a lot of things that used to be admin tasks that would fall to, somebody in an administrative support role now is on the plate of professors, themselves. And there's lots of other things that would, ways we could describe the university as part of fast capitalism. But what I want to talk about today is how this path that, in The Slow Professor, the path that they kind of say that the university is on, that we need to deliberately act against by slowing down, that path has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so problems that were happening in higher ed in terms of exploitation of adjunct labor and grad student labor, in terms of increasingly high standards and demands placed on the time of professors, all of these kinds of different things that were brewing have kind of been amplified by the pandemic. So yeah, higher ed is in crisis right now, but it's been in crisis, a crisis that's been brewing. So don't be fooled thinking it was just the pandemic that caused higher ed to kind of look the way it looks at this historical moment. It was really always there, right? The ivory tower is not actually operating outside of fast capitalism. Sorry, old boys who like to make it look that way. In fact, the university is deeply ingrained in the history of capitalism, especially in the United States, but in other places as well. So, the dark side of fast capitalism and the fast capitalist university is that, as I mentioned, right, exploits contingent faculty and grad students, squeezes tenure track faculty into more and more teaching and service and more unpaid admin and more minutiae, right? That whole thing has been gathering steam before the pandemic, but then was accelerated by the pandemic. And that's where we've seen layoffs, furloughs. I don't want to sound like overly pessimistic and say the end of tenure, but, universities questioning the idea of tenure. And certainly we've seen department closings where tenured faculty will lose their jobs. We've seen university closings as well, college closings happening, blamed on the pandemic, but really as part of, kind of like where we were headed anyway. Really, the pandemic, right, just like sped up what was going to happen and gave universities an excuse to make the cuts that have been on the horizon for a while. So it's not a pretty picture. And I didn't mean to come into your earbuds today with gloom and doom. But let's get real, right? It's never been a pretty picture inside of academia for anyone who's not a cis white man. So I want to be very, very clear about what it means to be an academic in late 2020 so that you can decide if it's for you. Because whether you're ready to believe it or not, we are at a crossroads right now, and it's time to choose your path. The purpose of your scholarly work is to create something that has not existed before. What you are doing as an academic is, in its essence, an act of creation, the making of knowledge that will change the world. This work is not about how many classes you teach. It's not about which committees you serve on. It's not about getting your email inbox to zero. It's not about checking the usually undefined boxes that will get you tenure. It's not about the nebulous journey to full professor. All of that is in service to the larger mission, the creation of something new. That is what your career is about. And we document that new creation through writing. The importance of writing and publishing is not to gain tenure or full to get or to keep a position, although writing and publishing will go a long way to do that for you. The purpose of writing and publishing is to write your unique contribution to the world into existence. In the context of crumbling academic institutions, there are a lot of upsides to this remaking of your academic identity. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 of them. The first one is, and I've said this before, you are not your institution. Your current institution is simply the container through which you do your work. There are and always will be other containers. They are secondary to the work, okay? They are secondary to the creation. You can do your creation through many different containers. And what I mean by container, right? Right now, your job that you have, if you have a job at a university, that is one type of container, right? But we know that academics can have job jobs in other places, right? Inside of nonprofits, inside of think tanks, inside of government agencies. There's lots of different containers. And there's always the possibility to create your own container, right? Okay, number 2. When your creation drives your career, the details of your institutional requirements for tenure and promotion are secondary. They literally don't matter. You will meet and exceed those requirements by focusing on what you are creating in your career, not by stressing about institutional requirements. If you focus on your creation and don't get tenure, it was not the right fit institution for you. Number 3, the organization of our day-to-day lives must center around the creation. The creation is your purpose. The creation is the point. All the other work, the teaching, the committees, the advising, supports the creation. Teaching enhances your creative mission because it gives you another way through which to do the work, but it is not the work itself. Okay. As a person with a doctoral degree, the work is that creation of knowledge, and the teaching can be a fabulous outlet. It can also be a way to co-create knowledge, right, with students. It can be a way through which you present this new knowledge to the world. It can be a place that would give you more ideas, but it's not the end. The creation, the thing you are creating, is the end. So in last week's podcast, I talked about the great opportunity we have right now to remake academia. In this episode, I want to emphasize the great opportunity you have right now to remake yourself. You are not your university. Your professional development is not their responsibility. That's why most universities do such a terrible job at supporting faculty. Your remaking is on no one else but you. So if you feel like 2020 showed you your university's true colors about how much they care about you and your work, if you feel like it exacerbated all the red tape, the busy work, and the minutiae standing between you and the space you need to create your work, and if you feel like 2020 made you question if you should stay in this crumbling mess called academia at all, and if you're ready to build your career around your scholarly work by organizing your career around your writing, if you're ready to step into your true academic identity and break free from the ways in which your institution holds you back, and if you're ready to take control of your writing and publications so that you can use them to live the career and life you want, then it's time for you to make a choice. Will you stick to the old way of doing things, or will you invest in remaking yourself and your career? If you're ready for remaking, and I sure am, then get on the waitlist for Navigate Your Writing Roadmap so that you can be the first to see the reimagined curriculum. So to get on the waitlist, you can find the link in the show notes. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the voice inside your head that might be saying, maybe I don't have what it takes to remake my career. Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit because it is a lot to think about, right? Especially after a really exhausting year. Like, are we really up for the work of remaking ourselves? So I want to start by saying that one of my favorite clients called me a permission coach. So I am tapping into my permission coach side today to tell you the most important message you need to hear to rise like a phoenix. You're allowed to believe in yourself and your writing. From the first day of our doctoral programs, we're told that we are not enough. We don't have enough time for all the work, enough energy to sustain ourselves, enough money to support the work that we do. It's ingrained in us at every turn that time, energy, and money are scarce in academia. These beliefs are enforced by us being underpaid as graduate students, expected to work nights and weekends out of quote unquote passion, or because that's what I had to do when I was a graduate student. All of these messages are always telling us, prove you are enough. Well, this works out perfectly for institutions because by the time we get to tenure track jobs, we are like, oh, I'm just lucky to have a steady job, right? Like we're so grateful because we've been living in scarcity for so long. So we pretty much tolerate the culture of overwork and the glorification of busy, the toxic colleagues, and the, we don't have any money for that messaging because we are so ingrained in scarcity that we feel like we have no choice but to suck it up, buttercup. And still, we spend sleepless nights wondering if our publications and grants are enough to get us tenure or full. What I've just described to you is the racist, ableist, heteropatriarchal culture of academia, and it is that way by design. This culture, designed by and for white, able-bodied cis men, was meticulously crafted to keep you out. It is designed to keep you feeling scarcity and not believing in yourself or the worth of your time, energy, or academic work. How else would the university get employees who work 60 to 80-hour weeks with no additional compensation? If we've learned anything as academics in 2020, it should be that we need to deeply and profoundly rely on ourselves because our institutions will not save us. The message of 2020 for all academics should be loud and clear. Save yourself. And to save yourself, you have to believe in yourself. So here's what believing in yourself looks like. You build a career based on a clear academic mission. This mission evolves over time to become your legacy. This unique to you legacy/mission is built by you for the people who will be impacted by your work despite your institution, not because of it or for it. You have the time, the energy, the money freedom to pursue your academic mission. This means there is space in your days for the kind of deep work required of scholarly pursuits. You blow by institutional milestones like tenure and full while setting your own milestones that support your larger vision. Academics who believe in themselves and who have put the systems and processes in place to support this deep belief in their own work and worth are not scared by seeing the crumbling of academia in 2020. That's because they know that what they're building is not dependent on their institutions. What they're building is bigger than their institution. And that belief will set you soaring in 2021. Does this feel like a radical transformation to you? I mean, it should. Academia needs remaking, and I, for one, would love to see it look a whole lot more like belief in yourself and a whole lot less like living in scarcity. Now, some of you are ready to, turn off this podcast while cursing my eternal optimism. So this next part is for you. Don't turn off the podcast yet. Achieving a career that looks like this bulleted list that I just read to you, right, is not some dreamy, esoteric thing. Those bullets are actually achieved through the two things I talked about last week: values and systems. The values part is easy. You just have to believe that academia should be remade to look like this list of things that I read. The values part is easy. You just have to believe that academia should be remade in that way that I just kind of cast out for you, instead of like the racist patriarchy. Okay, check, done. If you believe that, you're halfway there. The systems part is harder because the systems behind a mission-driven academic career, a career where your scholarly work, not the minutiae of emails and committee meetings, drives your day-to-day routine, are hidden. Okay, those systems aren't passed down to us by our mentors. Most of us know that our advisors got work done, but how they got work done is absolutely still a mystery when we graduate, for most of us. Or maybe we did see how they got work done, and it was by driving themselves into the ground. But those systems do exist. The systems you need to implement this mission-driven academic creation, they exist. And I've been teaching them and refining them for myself for almost 20 years, and for hundreds of other academics for almost 4 years in my work as an academic writing coach. So it boils down to you only really need 3 sets of systems, or we can group the systems you need into 3 groups. Number 1 is time management systems. Number 2 is writing systems. And number 3 is pipeline and planning systems. So for all you skeptics out there, if you are on board that the values we espouse inside of academia need to change, then all you need to start living out those values is a set of systems that frankly were never taught to you, but are absolutely 100% learnable. I teach these systems inside of the program I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Navigate. And, as I mentioned before, if you feel like I'm ready to do these things Kathy keeps talking about on the podcast, then Navigate is a really very supported and revolutionary way to start. So let's be really, really clear. You will not rise from the ashes of 2020 if you are not willing to learn a new way, if you are not willing to remake your values and remake your systems. We cannot collectively remake academia if we keep believing in scarcity, in suffering, and in settling. I think I just want to kind of end this podcast by saying we have an opportunity. So out of all the suffering, out of all the kind of destruction of 2020, we should absolutely mourn that. We should feel that. We might still be in the process of feeling that. And we are also allowed to believe in ourselves and to take this moment and say, if academia is not going to support me, if my institution's going to not understand what I'm trying to do, then I can remake my institution. I can remake my place inside of it. I can maybe throw the institution out altogether because I have something. I have that creation that is my career. And so I want you to think about how you can articulate your values and how you can improve your systems. I encourage you to take some time and actually write down, what are your values? What are your beliefs about what your everyday life should be like, about what academia should be like, about what the importance of your creation is in the world? Think about those things, write them down, figure it out, and say it out loud, because I bet it's really different from what academia has kind of handed to you or instilled with inside of you. Maybe there are kernels of things that are the same, but the way we live it out could be very, very different. And in making it different, we make it more equitable. We remake the spaces in our own image so that we can be successful within them without compromising who we are, without compromising our values. On the systems side, I mentioned 3 main kind of groups of systems, right? Time management systems, writing systems, and pipeline and planning systems. So we just want to explain what I mean by those to leave you with something, of course, I would love for you to come in and be part of Navigate. But if it's not for you, or maybe you're in a point in your career where it's a little early for you to enroll in a program like Navigate, then I want you to leave this podcast with some things to think about, things that you can take action on. So related to time management systems, I think you could read 1,000 time management books and never really be able to apply a lot of the things inside of an academic context. That's why we teach time management in a very specific way inside of Navigate, very specific to the professorial experience. But some nuggets that you're going to want to think about are, how are you automating as much as you possibly can inside of your day-to-day life? How are you using technology to create boundaries around your time? How can you change your mindset so that you are happily and strongly able to enforce those boundaries? How can you look for ways of using templates and workflows to make things easier for you? This idea that we have to struggle, there has to be struggle, it has to be hard, it has to take time. Let's think of the opposite of that. What if we could make systems within our day-to-day lives that would make things easy? What if we could take shortcuts? Why are we reinventing the wheel every day, every time? So thinking of time management systems from that perspective. The second group of systems is writing systems. And I do, really work hard to give you a lot of tangible, implementable advice on this podcast about writing systems. And then the final set of systems is your pipeline and planning systems. So what I really want to make clear about the importance of pipeline and planning is that, writing, making time to write, publishing more on the surface, just that is not enough to really support your creation. You need to have strategy. You need to have planning systems that are going to help you see the long game plan and how publications create the future that you want to see. And that's what we teach inside of Navigate in the pipeline and planning sessions part. So I hope that this podcast has inspired you to think about how you can remake your career amidst the crumbling of the crisis of academia, that you can remake your career and rise like a phoenix.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.